EXERT was a grand effort. It was funded by the National Institute on Aging. And I was very proud to be part of one of the first waves for NIA of supporting lifestyle intervention studies. So their portfolio changed right in the early 2000s, but really started to emphasize lifestyle interventions in mid 2000s. And we got in right at the time where they were opening their portfolio. So this was really good for us. It was a partnership between the ADCS and Wake Forest. ADCS coordinated the trial. We coordinated all the exercise part to make sure that people were doing their work, the intervention. So we planned to enroll 300 people, 300 adults, older adults with mild cognitive impairment at 13 sites, 13 clinical sites across the U.S. And we really wanted some diversity there in terms of geographic location, but we really worked hard too to make sure our participants were representative of the United States. And so the people that we hope to generalize our results to. So 13 sites. The protocol was one where people were screened heavily at the beginning to make sure that they were appropriate for the study. It was balanced for men and women. That was the intent anyway. And then they were randomized either to an aerobic training, same kind of model that I told you about before, 70 to 85 heart rate reserve, or stretching balance range of motion. So the key thing for me is that, what our messaging is, we're testing whether two different types of exercise, what the effects of two different types of exercise might be for brain health for people with mild cognitive impairment. And because that was our messaging, and that is truly how we felt at the time, a lot of trials, if you have a usual care and a high intensity, something in your intervention, people all want to go into one group and not the other. And so in where we are now in science, you really have to provide something that's good for these participants. Otherwise, why would they say yes? And if they do say yes, you have a different kind of group who say yes to this. There are some people who are willing to get nothing. That's just a very different population. So we felt it was very important to have a lower and a higher intensity exercise group so that we could offer something for everybody. So we kicked this off. What was, I think, some of the key, critical ingredients of our study that makes it, for me, important, rigorous, and unique is that we did not conduct our study or our intervention inside the walls of a hospital, which, when we started this work, most exercise studies had been done, where you come to the hospital and you exercise. So that for us was a problem, because if the results are positive, how are we going to roll this out in the community? This is going to take another study to get it out into the community. So I really feel very strongly about all my studies that whatever we develop in terms of the intervention has to be ready to roll out the next day into the community. So I always want community partners at the table. And so that's what we had. We worked with the YMCA, which is the national corporation here in America that has a central office, but then they have little branches all over the country. And so in each of our 13 sites, we partnered with the local YMCA to provide memberships for our participants, both groups, and also trainers. So they all had a personal trainer. But we were, real life, we can't really, if this was positive, you can't say, okay, you get a trainer every day that you ever want to go exercise. We got to still test something that's going to be realistic. So our participants were asked to exercise 4 days a week. And 2 of those days they get a trainer. 2 days they have to exercise on their own. And so that was what happened in the first 12 months. They get these 2 days a week for training, both groups, the stretching group and the aerobic group. And then at 12 months, they graduate to independent exercise. And that, so they kind of exercised on their own from month 12 to month 18. And we're testing whether to see whether all this training and attention, can it sustain them so that they can go exercise on their own? So I'm not going to talk about that data right now. We're still looking at that data. So our main data that we're presenting at AAIC is what happened in 12 months when they had the maximum amount of support. That's what we care about. That's the proof of concept, really. So the other unique thing I think about our study is that we wanted to make sure that both groups were equal with all the social support that they got. And that's a problem with some of the exercise studies. You'll get one group gets a lot of attention, and the other group says, go home, or we'll send you some educational materials in the mail. And there's something about social, support that could be protective all by itself against cognitive decline. So we wanted to make sure that both groups are the same, the social support. So if we saw a difference, It's not because one group received more social, but if we saw that they moved the same, then we're not going to be able to separate it, but we felt like that was okay. We know that our participants our patients with MCI need extra support. And we did want to show, if that was the case, that this is evidence that they need additional support. So they had to get out of their house, they had to drive or get to the YMCA somehow. So it was cognitively stimulating as well, and both groups were equal. And then finally we had, so that was their intervention there. If they missed a session, they got called. I mean, there was a lot of accountability there. People were watching them constantly, both the clinic and the YMCAs, and then our university, and then Wake Forest University School of Medicine, our group there that are all experts. We were watching, talking to all the YMCA trainers and checking on the participants. So there was a lot of checks in place to make sure everybody's doing the work and they're doing it the right way. They're not crossing over. So the aerobic group is not now doing the stretching and the stretching is not now doing aerobic. We watched to make sure both groups stayed in their groups, but they continued with their exercise. And then they would come to the clinic at baseline, and then month 6, 12, and 18 for these assessments, both for cognition and brain imaging. Some people agree to cerebral spinal fluid collection, although much fewer than we thought. And then, what I'm presenting at AAIC is the results of the cognitive data, and we'll present the imaging data at the Clinical Trials on Alzheimer's Disease, a CTAD conference at the beginning of December this year, later this year.